One of the kind of spatial experiences of being here is the feeling of coming. Normally I'm used to coming after poets, and I have a sense of where I stand in relation to the evening. And following an architect, there's this kind of disorientation that I'm not exactly sure what my position is. I'm planning to read a section of poems which are part of a longer sequence that I'm writing, and I've just picked a few. And the poems were started 5 years ago or so, when kind of inspired by a lot of the inspiration that I get has come because I work in an architecture practice, and I work as a writer for the architect Farshid Mustafi. And so often I find myself having to use language in such a different way from how I use it as a poet. And I came across one day in this day job of mine the architect Bruno Taut and this fantastical design proposal he has for a city which he imagined to be built in the Alps entirely of glass, and he never intended it really to be built. But the idea was that it would be this place which was made of glass and would therefore allow you to be closer to nature. At least that's what I think it's about. And it came at a time where where he was rejecting the idea of buildings as being buildings for factories or buildings for other kinds of uses. And there were two things that struck me about this idealistic vision. And the first was that the building was made of glass, and rather than making one feel really open, it made me feel really vulnerable. The idea that you would live in somewhere where you never had any protection when you were changing your clothes, so that people would be able to see you all the time. And it's like the opposite of the Freudian idea of repression, that you don't have enough repression because you're not able to hide anything. And the other thing about it was the idea that the building had no use, because there's something which is really unnerving about being a poet who has been lucky enough to receive funding for a number of years and therefore has spent a lot of time sitting around thinking about themselves and how to write poems about sitting around. And it's kind of maddening to have no purpose, and for that in itself to be an activity. So those two things were sort of what gave me the idea of using this building as the setting for a sequence of poems. As it happened, you can't obviously visit Bruno Taut's Alpine architecture because it doesn't exist. But another architect who works a lot with transparency is Corbusier, and I went across to his Villa Savoye in Paris. And one of the things, this is not from that building, but he has these strip windows which have the same idea about being able to bring nature much closer to you. And the idea is that by cutting off sort of the pavement directly beneath you and the infinity of the sky above, you might be able to, it's as though you lose sense of perspective so that the sea is right up against your window. But again, rather than necessarily making you feel that the sea is a really intimate part of your experience, there is something strangely disorienting about not knowing how far away that horizon is. So these poems, whatever kind of prologue that is, some of the things which were interesting for me about this was there's the idea of a man living in a house which is essentially like the Villa Savoye, but up on a mountain, overlooking the sea, on his own, and what it feels like to be in a space like that, where you're sort of trying to get closer to this distant, desired, yearned for other, the horizon or another person or whatever it is that's far away and might be closer. So the poems are called House for the Study of Water. There are a sequence of them. They're imagined as a series of letters written by a man living on his own in this house, sometimes with a dog, to his brother, whose name is Max. Whatever you love most dearly. My dearest brother, last night I saw water playing in the pond where the woman was swimming. I was stationed in the house for the study of water amid parapets and ruby red columns under the open sky. I was with a man, his name was Curtis. It was muggy outside. He said it wants to be a storm, and I said the water, held no more shape than a dream. He is so much better than me. I have so much confusion. I lay on my stomach and made notes in pencil. From the veranda in front of the waiting room, I can see the entire garden, including the river, and further, the shapes of people I knew, including you. I'd like to get closer, but what the hell? In any case, I can almost hear you saying to yourself, he always was an over-ambitious but timorous child. to which I can add only the assurance that now I am a man and nothing in a man's life is more certain than his being too timid or too stupid or something. It goes without saying. A man cannot have intercourse with a river, but what then can he hope for? If you do not know, she says, why then do you not ask? You want to stay with me, to come away with me on holiday, to live with me in my house? The truth is, if I could, I would have followed her permanently and without resistance. Or did you expect me to just lie here like a corpse? Once at the bottom of the heart, always at the bottom of the heart. Descend lower, you say. At the bottom of the stairs, a landing stage for boats. It's hot. Nobody cares about these boats. You say they came from nowhere, but I say these boats are love and they were made for love. I closed the shutters and took £30 for the ferry, which left at 8. I have no writing materials. Everything I own has been taken to some kind of depot. This one is called So That's What You Think a Soul Is For. Last night, when I was reading, in the dim light when it was half or almost completely dark, I saw my soul sitting at the same time on a string-bound chair by the mirror in the adjoining room and couldn't help myself say something or make some noise to express my feelings. It didn't remind me of a book, it reminded me of a computer. I don't know why my soul looked like the inside of a computer. The quote for this next one, I think, is Walter Benjamin, or a version of it. Everything lost mingles with what's been forgotten for centuries, forming countless uncertain compounds. Late January. The sun is setting over the sea, and the only thing that interests me is how can I check that you've received anything I've sent you? I know it's unfashionable to say such things. Anyone reading this would think I was completely fucked in the head. But for some time now, I've had the feeling I'm dying, and I'm worried that when I'm dead, you won't be able to reach me. Dear Max, I feel so extraordinarily far from you and from anybody. The nature of love. There's a road I'm traveling on, a country road or a road in a mountain, and it's dark or flooded, and I'm looking for something in particular, a shoe perhaps, I can't remember. Why do I forget what's important? I have ideas and I forget them. You tell me things and I forget them. And all at once it occurs to me, with so little exactitude about loss or pain or abandonment, I'd like someone to talk to. It makes me want to call you. You who are without a doubt my favorite person. It makes me want to call you 1,000 times a day. And this is Occupation of a Stranger's House. One day the world was divided into those who remembered and those who did not. I went up to a cave. Overnight it had been overrun again by spiders. I took a match to the bottom of a web and let the flame creep up to the spider sitting there and burn it. For some reason, perhaps the match had punctured a hole in its abdomen before melting it completely. The spider began to squeal before collapsing onto me, and maybe you, for always you were here. Sometimes I think the world is just a vast breeding ground for mosquitoes. Dear Max, the stars grow paler, the sun is rising with grace and power. I lie here in my shirt, being tried repeatedly by a council of mosquitoes who find me sorrowful and stupid and ordinary and rather dull, and worst of all, his tastes are vulgar and he writes like a dog. But am I an animal? A dog can't write. Exactly. In the afternoon heat, I sit with my feet down looking out of the window. What's so awful about me is not my envy or my competitiveness or my cruelty. What's worse is this dog-like devotion. How sad I look sitting here. About whom? About what? Sometimes when I close my eyes, I imagine you're here watching me. I can't explain it, but I have this bizarre notion that you might come and carry me, like a dog. Exactly, exactly. Out of this house, this life, this world. And this is the last in the sequence, for the moment. Let's move to America and be somewhere. One night, long past midnight, I came down to the end of the garden and told you a long involved story about a man named New York who was like New York, only more so, funny and clever, but also disturbing. He lived on the 3rd or 4th or 14th story of a high-rise built in 1819, which hadn't been touched since. Sometimes, in the evenings when the hours seemed huge and far apart, he went running through the city, not for any good reason or in any particular direction, just heading out like a no-good animal for 3 or 4 or 400 blocks until, as happens when one is tired or has been running for a very long time, he found it hard to see himself because he was just a long black strip and he couldn't tell if he was getting closer to something very, very distant or the opposite, if he was almost gone. A clear view over the sea. Shh. What time is it? So much time has passed. I thought it was evening, but it's 3 a.m. and I'm not where I thought I was. The truth is, where I am is only where I am in relation to you, and I'm further from you now than you are from me. Dear Max, where are you? I'm here. I've turned on all my lamps. Thanks.